A very question I see online and that I get asked is why geckos may not be eating. So lately I had a personal experience with my gecko Leo of him not eating for a while, and I got a lot of good recommendations and advice from some very great people. So today's video is going to be about that and some of the notes I was able to take during that, and to help you guys out with your geckos as well. The thing with geckos, I don't want to say problem, but thing with problem gecko, I don't know, it's Tuesday. But the thing with geckos is that they're such a common beginner reptile and lizard. So a lot of people get them and get real concerned when they are not eating, which is, I'm guilty of that. I've done that at one point, and I'm sure many of you, if you're new to the reptile community, have done that as well. So we're going to go over some of the main reasons of why your leopard gecko may not be eating, and also some problems that you might want to look out for when they're not eating, if that is the case. But as I said just a second ago, they are a very common beginner lizard and reptile, and they're a little more complex than people think. They can only have one kind of diet. They cannot eat any produce, so they not eat vegetables, especially stuff like tomatoes and carrots and onions. They can't eat vegetables or fruit because it's too acidic for their stomach, and their stomach is made to digest meat, or in this case, insects. So as I said in my last video, they can only eat things like mealworms, crickets is another popular one, locusts, grasshoppers, all those kind of things are main gecko diet food. Dubia roaches is another one, but those are all staple foods for geckos. Things like waxworms and hornworms are more used as treats. I don't give them to my gecko that often. I give them here and there as a treat if he's been doing good over the week with handling, or if he's been, just eating the same thing all week, then they do get kind of tired of it, and that's another aspect of why they may not be eating. But some very common reasons that your gecko may not be eating is that the number one is definitely that the lighting and the temperature may not be right in the cage, and he or she may not feel comfortably eating in the environment that you've placed them in. Now, I'm not talking like their hides and stuff. I'm talking the actual temperature and humidity. If the humidity is too high or too low, they may not want to eat, and that's also going to prevent them from shedding, which is another aspect that plays towards their diet. But weather is a huge factor, and the weather, obviously, you control the weather in here. So you can change that and help your gecko out by maintaining a good weather and a good climate in the cage in order for them to eat and shed properly. Which brings me to my next point, shedding. Shedding, a lot of the times they will fast themselves for a week, up to a week or 2 weeks prior to shedding. Shedding is basically when they shed an excess layer of skin off and then they eat it. And when they eat this shed, they are basically recycling nutrients that they would otherwise be losing. So, that's a lot to eat, a lot of skin. They're basically eating their own body. But in all seriousness, that's a lot of skin that they eat, and they do tend to fast themselves before shedding because they know that they're going to eat their shed, so they like to save room for it, and also it helps them shed faster when they don't have as much food stored in their stomach or their tail. Another common reason is mating season, that season is actually upon us right now. This mating season goes from early spring to about mid-late spring, and especially male geckos like to fast themselves during mating season when they're looking for a female. So he thinks there's a female mate in here that he can mate with and make baby geckos, but of course there's not, because one gecko is enough for me right now. But in his little tiny lizard mind, he actually tried to walk off a table this morning, so I'm kind of questioning how smart he may be. But they do like to fast themselves during mating season to get better. They have better exercise then. If you're skinnier, you can move around better, and you can look for a mate better if you're a gecko. Let's picture you're a gecko for a second, as ridiculous as that sounds. Car insurance. And something that you do have to remember that I also forgot when my gecko wasn't eating is that they are built to go very long periods without eating. Now, they store all their energy and protein in their tails, so what I like to compare the tail to is kind of like a gas gauge. If your gas gauge is low on your car, that means you're running out of gas, and you should probably get some gas. If it's full, that means you're good and you can drive. This isn't an automobile video. This is about lizards, so back to lizards. Anyways, I compare that to that because their tail is basically like that gauge that tells you if their tail is fat, then they're pretty much good and they can go a while without eating. If their tail is thin, which I'll actually show you a diagram right here, then that means that they are either anorexic or that they aren't getting enough food and they don't have enough stored, which can lead them to get sick and maybe die. So definitely want to keep track of their tail, which is also, I'll make a separate video about this, but which is also why it's bad when your gecko's tail pops off. Now, usually it means that they're extremely stressed and they feel that they're very endangered, enough that they could die. So when the tail pops off, that's not good, and that's like all their protein, and like picture your stomach coming off of your body. Yeah, that's kind of what happens with geckos. So lastly, we're going to go over some of the bad common reasons that your gecko may not be eating. Stress is a #1 reason, and a not so nice one, that your gecko may not be eating. When you place a gecko into a new environment, it is going to take a few weeks to get used to it. He's just getting used to his now, probably like a week ago, I'd say. He's getting real comfortable around me, comes out and stuff, but when I first got him, he didn't want to eat, and many won't eat when they first get placed into a new environment, or in this case, a new tank. So you just kind of have to be patient with it and give them a few weeks to settle in, and then I promise they'll start eating. If they don't eat within like a week to 2 weeks after getting them, then there may be something else wrong. We'll talk about that later in the video. Illness is another thing that could be wrong. Obviously, you don't want that to be the case, but if your gecko isn't eating, and maybe if it's having loose stool, or if it's pooping more than it normally does, or even blood in the poop, or regurgitating or throwing up the food, that definitely means there is a sign of illness. And parasites, of course, are another thing. Picture like you eating, sometimes the food doesn't get chewed properly and it stays alive in their stomach. That can happen with super worms or mealworms when they're babies, so you definitely have to be careful of that. It means, it sounds, a tip I've often heard is to cut the heads off of the worms. I don't do that unless I absolutely have to, because then they won't move around much. And my gecko doesn't like to eat anything that doesn't move, because he thinks it's dead and he doesn't want dead food. But sometimes that food can turn into a parasite and eat the food once it gets into their stomachs. So you obviously don't want that to happen, because then it doesn't properly get to the tail, and that may stop them from eating in the future. And parasites also affect their appetite. When they have a parasite, then they may not eat a lot. Like my old gecko Ziggy, he had a parasite and he barely ate. And it unfortunately eventually led him to starvation. I think he had a parasite right from the get-go. No pun intended. I feel super embarrassed for just saying that right now. But I think Ziggy had one right from the start. It's better. But anyways, that caused him not to eat that much, and not even that much, but at all. So you definitely have to watch out for parasites in geckos. Common signs of it is bloody stool, or like I mentioned a minute ago, throwing up the food or regurgitating it. That may mean that they have a parasite inside them. You can easily get a parasite fixed by going to the vet. For parasites, what they'll most likely do is just give you a medication you can give them. I can't promise it's going to be the easiest to give them. You may have to feed it to them with their food, but the medication can kill the parasite. One other thing definitely is impaction. Impaction is when the stomach is impacted. It's hard to tell impaction because geckos, you have to look at he's currently moving around and staring at me. But it's hard to tell impaction because geckos, they are pretty squirmy when you hold them and stuff. So the best idea you have is to place them in a clear container where you can see it clearly. That's what I did with Leo to make sure he didn't have impaction. But if they do have impaction, you're gonna see like a dark spot on their stomach. And that basically means that something's wrong with their stomach, and that could be a main reason why they aren't eating. There's only a few things you can do to help your gecko eat, because it is an exotic animal. It is a lizard, and unlike other animals like bearded dragons, they don't eat as often as you would think. But the #1 thing is patience with geckos. A lot of patience is required to learn how to handle them and for them to get comfortable around you. And a lot of patience is required in order to feed them and get them to eat what you have for them. Also, what you can do is try new food. It's not ideal because the food that you may be feeding could be really easy to get and really easy to feed and easy to dust. So it may not be ideal, but in the end, you kind of just have to say whatever's best for your pet is what you got to do. Not handling is another thing you can do. Don't handle them in the morning and during the day. Always handle them in the evening. I always take mine out in the evening to say hello to me and let them explore on my bed and stuff. But don't handle them during the day because that will impact their appetites because they may get stressed and freaked out, and that's going to cause them to not eat even longer. Your two last resorts are a vet visit. Now, it's kind of hard to find an exotic animal specialist for geckos. There's only one around here and it's like an hour away, but if it's needed, it's needed, but most likely what they're going to tell you to do is force feed. Force feeding isn't exactly ideal because it's basically, your gecko isn't going to really appreciate it because you're force feeding the gecko and you basically have to pry its mouth open in order to get it to eat. So especially for a gecko that doesn't like handling, that's not going to be a very pleasant experience for the gecko. I've covered pretty much everything that I'd like to cover for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, or you can leave comments in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you guys next time here in my room with Leo. See you guys later.